We believe from what we see on the ground that we're going to have a huge digital divide from those who are currently in their 20s, 30s, 40s, not currently using internet. And while we might be able to make exceptions and say people who are 80, 90, fair enough if they don't want to get onto internet, but what about those where the government and private sector is relying on delivering services to those people over the internet in the future, but they don't have a laptop, they're not linked to internet. So that is a big issue for rural and remote communities, especially where socio-economic levels are really being challenged, but it's also a city problem as well. So on that front, I think across Australia, it's one of those areas when we look at regional development, we focus on economic, social and environmental aspects, and that's where you can see some come very close to working across each other's turf. In terms of future opportunities going forward, some bright lights and bright opportunities, I think. Before I mentioned how we are in the tropics, and the tropics is basically the future zone of the world, we believe. And so tropical expertise is a great area of opportunity, and that is whether you're in Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, out west in Mount Isa. We all have know-how and experience in developing products and services for a tropical environment. So there's opportunities for developing science and research for the tropics, well catered for by James Cook University, or Australian Institute of Marine Science, CSIRO, and others already in our region. So we have capability in designing houses and facilities for tropical zones that experience cyclones. We know how to manage mine sites and remediation in tropical environments. We know how to manage floods and disaster management in tropical climates. So there are a lot of opportunities there, and of course that aligns very closely with our interest in also looking at how we manage climate change adaptability and look after our environment as we develop our region further. In terms of other opportunities, this has been mentioned earlier, but there are opportunities for opening up more agricultural land in our region. We're blessed with very good water and soils, and as previously mentioned, there's a North Queensland irrigation agricultural strategy and trial happening along the Flinders River in the northwest of our state. It's seeking to develop about a 15,000 hectare mosaic style irrigation process. It's actually going to try to secure in the future what is about 2% offtake off the Flinders River at only certain times of the year. I'm not an expert in this area, but from my perspective, it's a very exciting opportunity to link our water and climate and our soil strengths with the opportunity for agriculture, more remote employment, and also linking closely with the beef strategy where they will come together to support that. I'll also finish up on talking about the transport that might be linking all of this together as well. Other opportunities on the NBN, on the positive side, we are excited about having a first mover advantage and how we can be trialling and developing catalytic projects there that can drive economic and job activity in the region. Certainly RDA is partnering with a number of stakeholders to play a leadership role there, and delighted to be involved in those initiatives. The mining sector I mentioned before, mining is maybe not as big as the Pilbara, but certainly a very big part of our world. And if you do the aggregate of Mackay North, then certainly we are a major hitter in the mining sector. So from the Mackay region out, you've got the big Galilee Basin and the coal reserves, huge business in coal. Certainly also coal seam methane out that area. In the corridor that I work in from Mount Isa to Townsville, we have gold, copper, lead, silver, zinc, phosphate, magnetites, also new coal developments, and even some iron ore. So we are very well blessed with a variety there, but once again the pressure is on in terms of being able to cater for that in terms of staffing. Now I'll finish up on my example of how we're taking a regional initiative to resolve a challenge, work collaboratively to get an economic long-term outcome in our region. The Townsville to Mount Isa area has also an economic development body called MITES, Mount Isa Townsville Economic Zone Inc., MITES. And they've taken a lead on project which a lot of us have joined to be able to do one whole of region, whole of organisational perspective on 50-year infrastructure planning for transport. The carrot and the challenge was thrown to us by Michael Deegan, the CEO of Infrastructure Australia. Many of you I'm sure will know him. and he calls a spade. He can be very direct with people. Out in Julia Creek a year ago, he had a lot of us around a glass of wine and said, I'll throw you the challenge. Your region has huge opportunity. It's not being recognised. You need to come up with a 50-year infrastructure plan for your transport. That's the way of the future. Okay, we took the challenge. We then got together a large number of stakeholders. As we said, MITES was the auspicing body, and just last week the interim report was released, and we're in a consultation stage to finalise that. You won't see it from there, but in the inside cover is just some of the stakeholders that were involved, from economic bodies through to industry such as the mining companies, through to transport operators like the Port of Townsville, Queensland Rail, and so on. And of course the very significant support of Infrastructure Australia by having one of their consultants work with us on the development of this plan. So it was a great sense of collaboration, which I think is a great example of how you need to move in the future. More and more so, we need to be effective collaborators in our region. The goal of this report was to build awareness of a significant national supply chain, increase the private sector investment into the region, and help the state and help the federal government to help us, to work with us. It was said in the context that we realise that at the moment our supply chain between Mount Isa and Townsville, catering for mining and agriculture in particular, is very fragmented, has little private sector investment, is reliant on the taxpayer's dollar, hence all the decisions are made by government. Not all, but a lot of decisions are made by government. There's no long-term expansion planning, inadequate development and regulatory approval process, and of lack of clarity on relationships between port and other players in the supply chain. They're the issues we're dealing with. On the positive side, the corridor is currently worth $15 billion to the national economy, and the 50-year growth expectation is to grow to between $44 and $84 billion per annum. So we say there's a great opportunity, there's a great block. We're not getting productive outcomes on this corridor for the future growth. So this report has brought together stakeholders and people who previously have never shared information to be able to come up with some scenario planning going forward. So we managed to encourage a very well and highly regarded consultant who had worked on the National Land and Freight Strategy. We thought he had a great starting point for us. We engaged Luke, and he's actually done this development work for us. We're delighted because it's actually taking us on a pathway that will actually help us work out how supply and demand can be met in the opportunity in the next 50 years. We are finalising this document in the next 6 weeks after a public consultation stage, and it will be up on the MITES website so anyone can take a look at it. What we hope to do then is to be able to work with other partners through government and private sector to be able to basically roadshow it, talk it up and tell the world about what the opportunities are for investment. Rather than taking the approach that we rely on government for all investment, we know everyone has fairly empty coffers in Australian and state government. Mind you, we will come back to royalties for regions. We do recognise we need to work harder with the private sector for infrastructure investment in this country in the future. I don't think we can avoid that. I'd love to say the Gladstone was mentioned this morning. I wholly agree that Gladstone 50 years ago was a leap of faith, and build the infrastructure, they will come. The dollars just aren't there, and that's not actually the way I think it can so easily work in the future as much as I would like to think it would. So what we're doing is we're investing in our future by all of us putting money into the plan. We're all spending our time on the plan, and we will all go out and advocate and discuss it with government at all layers and all departments that are relevant, but also we are going with the support of Infrastructure Australia to be able to meet with leading heads of investment agencies and private sector organisations such as the superannuation funds and other, who are looking for long-term returns on investment where we believe the opportunities can align. So there'll be more on that coming, but we think that is quite a significant project, so much so that Infrastructure Australia, both in the and through Parliament, have raised this as an Australian leading initiative in terms of infrastructure development and collaboration to see the way forward. No one else in Australia has a 50-year corridor plan. In terms of that, in finishing up on my presentation and going to discussions, I'd also like to say that the next stage of this is to say we've looked at the freight infrastructure needs. What is the other supporting infrastructure that we need to address? Admittedly, it's always hard at the 50-year level. The closer you get to the proximity mark, then of course it's going to be much more robust and helpful. But we know, and through a lot of work that's been done by others and people we collaborate with, that the Northern Energy Corridor there has significant opportunities for the development of solar, geothermal, wind, potentially other gas sources for developing what we call the Northern Australia Sustainable Resources Corridor. Long name, I'm sure we'll shorten it over time. But what we believe we need to do to complement the freight is also to be looking after transport, is saying everyone who operates, whether in agriculture or mining and other sectors that may grow, need energy, they need water and they need land. And they'll need a skilled labour force. So they're the other areas that we're addressing in collaboration now to say to support this, we move on to this area. And with that, we believe there's significant investment opportunities. Alone in the area around, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it. I haven't got my glasses on, but around this area here, we already have a company that is ready to invest in wind generation if they could get it to market. And some of you may have heard a project called Copper String, which was about trying to secure transmission investment between Mount Isa and Townsville. Unfortunately, that hasn't raised the funds it needs to at this stage, but we certainly believe the big picture is big opportunity here. So in closing, this is a photo of some of my committee members out in Julia Creek only back in December. But in closing, what I would say that we have recognised not only as RDAs but in working with our partners in the region, there are a few key things we need to focus on for our future economic and social and environmental development. Certainly it's recognising our strengths and competitive advantages and also our linkages with the tropical world. I think that is an opportunity that is ripe for picking. And certainly, and also recognising that, we also need to be able to raise the profile of that opportunity. Luke, I think, mentioned this morning, and maybe even John mentioned, in Canberra we don't actually have a lot of representation. My figure that I got on the MPs and senators in the north of Australia came to 13, and I think that's out of about 150 odd down in Canberra. So we're really underrepresented. Hence, if Queensland was a separate state, we'd have many more and North of Queensland was a separate state, we would have many more senators and be a bit more like Tasmania, even though they're a fraction the size of us. So you can see why sometimes we want that argument. But of course, in doing that, we also need to understand our area well and make sure we're conveying that evidence base through to government and private sector stakeholders and investors. As mentioned, an average doesn't always give you a very clear picture. So we understand we really need to get down to the very locally based, place-based solutions. Look at what will work on the ground, not will work from up above coming down to us. What do we need to do and take up that needs to actually get done to make our area work? Certainly long-term planning we think is absolutely critical. Our country is too driven by political cycles and budgets for the good of infrastructure development. And that's why another reason I believe private sector investment is going to be a significant factor going forward to actually break the cycle of just being on government budget cycles. And certainly last but not by any means least, I think community leadership is absolutely critical. We have some wonderful leaders in all of our regions, I'm sure, but it's going to be so critical for going forward, the people who can stand up and lead our communities in terms of thinking innovatively, thinking creatively, thinking outside the box and tapping into those opportunities for future generations. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.